and welcome to the Climate Finance Workshop. My name is Structured Finance, a component that covers the area of climate finance under UK NIAF. So we will soon begin the full proceedings for the day. We have a few dignitaries here, and I'll start to introduce them as they start to come in shortly. So I'm sure you've all seen the program of events. So we're going to start off with a welcome address from the DG Budget, who is on his way here. I have the Permanent Secretary, the Federal Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning, representing the Honorable Minister of State, Federal Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning. We have the Director General of the Budget Office. We have a welcome address from the Honorable Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, which we will play shortly. We also have a representative of the Honorable Minister, State Environment, who will be arriving shortly. So I'd like to just ask everybody to please take a seat as we escort the dignitaries in shortly. We also have representing the FCDO, Ms. Gil Waranda, who is the head of the Economic Growth Team. We have Professor Onya representing UK NIAF. I'd like us to please welcome the Director General of the Budget Office, Dr. Ben Akabuezi, into the house. Also like us to please welcome the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning, Dr. Idowu, into the house. The representative of the Honorable Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, the representative of the Honorable Minister of State, Finance, Budget and National Planning, the Director General of the Budget Office, the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning, the Head of the Economic Growth Team, FCDO, the Head of the UK NIAF team. I'd like to welcome all of you to our Climate Finance Workshop. This two-day workshop promises to be very interesting. We are going to go through a number of presentations and panel discussions, which we'll hope will start to kickstart the discussion on how Nigeria continues to implement climate change indicators and development of climate smart infrastructure, and to also look for bringing in climate finance into some of the infrastructure projects and how Nigeria will meet its nationally determined contributions. So I'd like to welcome everybody else, distinguished participants, to this workshop as we kick off with an address from the Honorable Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning. Also like to recognize the Executive Director of the Rural Electrification Fund, Dr. Sanusi Ohere, the Managing Director and CEO of the REA, Ahmad Salijo Ahmad, to this workshop. So we will kick off with the address by the Honorable Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning.
Representative of Honorable Minister, Finance, Budget and National Planning, Permanent Secretary, Budget and National Planning, and representative today of the Honorable Minister of State, Budget and National Planning. British Deputy High Commissioner area. Still expecting the Minister of State Environment, the MD, UK NIAF, chief executives of government agencies, they are represented, the senior government officials, panelists, resource persons, participants, ladies and gentlemen. It is with great pleasure that I welcome you all to this climate finance workshop that to have a mind of its own. Overall, Mr. President's message at COP26 was clear, with an indication that Nigeria needs about $1.5 trillion US dollars over the next 10 years to close our infrastructure gap. And this is evidenced by the post of the National Development Plan 2021 to 2025, which is recently made public, as well as the revised National Integrated Infrastructure Master Plan. Both policy documents envisage active private sector participation, with less than 15% of the needed financing for infrastructure expected to come from government budgets. The policy documents ensure that Nigeria's infrastructure expansion projects are integrated across sectors and designed to be environmentally friendly. In view of the above, interagency collaboration and close working relationships across sectors is imperative and inevitable. The 2022 budget, which is currently before the National Assembly, the last stages of the appropriation process, is the first intentionally cross-sectoral gender and climate responsive budget prepared in our own history of budget making in Nigeria. The 2022 budget, called Secular, clearly articulated the expectations around these objectives. The 2022 to 2024 fiscal strategy paper also documents federal government's focus on climate smart investments over the medium term. We hope to entrench this further and ensure compliance with relevant messaging across various sectors as the time goes on. The outcome of this workshop must therefore result in veritable options for government with respect to climate finance, as well as help participating MDAs understand how to package bankable projects that qualify for some of the available climate finance. I look forward to the various sessions today and tomorrow, and I'm also pleased to see that an MDA like the National Rural Electrification Agency, who participated actively at COP26, will be sharing their experiences in the learning/lesson sharing session tomorrow. The REA, I believe, has a lot to share from their experience in this regard. Invited guests, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, let me end by reminding you all that Nigeria's capital investment requirements by far exceed available financial resources to government. It is therefore my hope that as we explore alternative financing arrangements through PPPs and other forms of climate finance, MDAs will remain mindful of their ministerial priority areas, as well as relevant contributions to the achievement of the National Development Plan 2021 to 2025. I thank you all for listening and close with a word of thanks to our development partners, the UK NIAF, the FCDO, NDC partnership, as well as all the panelists and resource persons who will be contributing in one way or the other today and tomorrow, of course. Once again, you're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, the Director General of the Budget Office. The next item on the agenda is a goodwill message from the Honorable Minister of State, Budget and National Planning, Prince Clem Agba, represented by the Permanent Secretary of the Federal Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning, Mrs. Olushola Idowu. Please let's welcome her to the stand.
I'm giving this goodwill message on behalf of the Honorable Minister of State, Budget and National Planning, Prince Clem Agba. I'm pleased to join you today at this climate finance workshop that brings together experts, development partners, and others from the public sector to discuss issues that border on climate finance and alternate funding arrangements for climate-friendly projects. As you are aware, the National Development Plan 2021 to 2025 has been approved by the Federal Executive Council with an expected investment outlay of 348.7 trillion naira. The funding arrangement for the plan recognizes the use of private capital, private sector investment, as well as innovative financing arrangements that will help actualize the plan. Finalization of the plan involved critical detailed sessions, working with state and non-state actors, as well as subnational governments. This is to ensure that all critical issues and elements to address the negative environmental effects of industrialization and the overexploitation of natural resources that have led to severe climate change and environmental degradation across the globe has been taken care of. It's also to ensure a global shift towards more environmentally sustainable economic models. Therefore, to reduce the impact of climate change and self-efficient environmental management system, the Nigerian government, during the implementation phase of the plan, will take on a major environmental sustainable model, such as a green economy which reduces the harmful effects from industrial and household activities through initiatives such as climate adaptation, preserving biodiversity, and adoption of renewable energy. Bioeconomy, which utilizes biotechnology
Saki.
Bioeconomy, which utilizes biotechnology in real sectors such as agriculture and industry to achieve sustainable production. Circular economy, which addresses the unsustainable exploitation of reuse and recycling of resources to eliminate waste. These models will ensure the sustainable exploitation of resources, limit environmental impact across activities, and create a clearer and a safer environment for all. And last but not the least, is also to strengthen disaster management capacity at all levels of governance by ensuring that disaster preparedness and response are essential elements of coherent emergency management for national, subnational, and to establish a functional disaster management system. Now, let me assure you that we ensure the effective delivery of the National Development Plan 2021-2025, and we continue to engage with all players in the ecosystem who are available to help with the PPP arrangements, as well as smart funding alternatives and options, such that this workshop offers with a view of actualizing the country's medium-term objectives. I'm pleased to know that state governments are also participating in the session today. I want to say a big thank you for your kind attention, and God bless.
Thank you, the Permanent Secretary of the Federal Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning, Mrs. Olusola Idowu. Thank you so much, ma'am. So I will go straight to the next item, which is a goodwill message on behalf of the British Deputy High Commissioner, Mr. Ben Llewellyn-Jones, to be presented by Gil Waranda, who is the head of the Economic Growth Team in FCDO, which is the Foreign Commonwealth Development Office of the United Kingdom, our development partner. Please welcome Ms. Gil Waranda.
Thank you very much. Allow me to stand on existing protocols in the interest of time. With apologies from our High Commissioner and Deputy High Commissioner, who are both down in Lagos at the moment, and actually having a session on climate finance with some of the financiers down there, which just shows you how important this topic is to the UK government. But it's not just us, it's something which you'll find all the development partners are talking about. So we can see we've got Pierre online from the World Bank, but it's the same with African Development Bank, Islamic Development Bank, the EU, USAID, Germany. We're all working together through the Development Partners Group to further the climate agenda, because it is one of the biggest risks that the world faces today. And we've just hosted COP26, Conference of the Parties, which is basically when all the nations get together and recognise the crisis we're facing. And we had a wonderful representation from the Nigerian government there, not just the president, but also several ministers. And before that, Nigeria submitted its enhanced promises. It's called an NDC. I think the best way of putting it is promises and commitments. But it's important to note that Nigeria said it would reduce its emissions, but it also said we can do more. Some of it's conditional on you, the rest of the world, in particular the developed countries like the UK, who created some of the emissions that have put us in the place we are today. It's incumbent on those countries such as ourselves to help. And that help comes in various forms, technical assistance, but it also comes in the form of finance. And so what we have here today is two of our programs that are working to help build projects and find projects in order to unlock that climate finance. But there's going to be a journey we all go on together. We can only do this alongside both the Nigerian government and the states, but also alongside the other development partners. So it's very much the start of a journey. Nigeria hasn't tapped into as much of the finance available either in the public sector or the private sector that we'd have liked. And in order to do that, what we need to do is I'm going to quote Prince Charles here. He said, the issue is that we don't have enough bankable projects. It's not a shortage of money in the world, it's a shortage of bankable projects. And so that's what this conference starts on today, but it's a long journey, and we've got funding for 3 years for UK NIAF to help with building this pipeline of projects, help with joining up partners, including with the NDC partnership, and through that enable Nigeria to have better, cleaner, greener infrastructure. So thank you very much for attending today, and I hope that you'll not just come to this session, but the future sessions on this, and indeed make use of the tools that UK NIAF is developing in this space. Thank you.
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Gail Waranda from the Foreign Commonwealth Development Office on behalf of the Deputy British High Commissioner. So the next item on the list is the welcome remarks by the Honorable Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, Dr. Zainab Shamsuna Ahmed. We are going to kick off her address because I understand that we have limited time with her as she's due to attend the Federal Executive Council meeting, which is going to kick off any moment from now. So she's just going to say a few words addressing us. So we seem to have a slight technical connection. We're connecting to the other side to get. I just got a message from her saying we will do the remaining part of the address, and she sends everyone her good wishes, and we should proceed with the workshop, and she will send the rest of the address as she has to go into the Federal Executive Council meeting right now. So we'll just move on to presentation of the workshop objectives by the MD of UK-NIA, Professor Chidi Onia.
I noticed that when they called the other presenters, you clapped for them as they were coming up. Not sure if there's something wrong at date, but I'm glad you clapped now. So thank you so much, everyone, for coming. It's my great pleasure to have all of you here, especially those that are seated here and those that are logged on. And in my brief remarks, I intend to provide a short overview of our program and underline UK-NIA's commitment to support. Sorry, I'm double jabbed, so this is stopping me from speaking very well. And to share UK-NIA's commitment in line with other partners like the NDC partnerships and others to the federal government of Nigeria, especially coming out of the COP26 commitments by the president. The capacity to secure the financing for critical infrastructure projects is central to this objective of what we're doing today and underlines UK-NIA's work with the Budget Office and more broadly with the Federal Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning, the Federal Ministry of Environment, and other infrastructure MDAs at the national and at the subnational levels. So let me share a little bit about UKNIAF for those of you that are unaware of what we do. UKNIAF is the UK Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Funded Infrastructure Advisory Facility, active in power, roads, and infrastructure finance. The infrastructure finance component, which is hosting this particular event or supporting the Budget Office of the Federation in doing that, provides technical assistance to improve the institution and human capacity of federal and subnational MDAs to identify, screen, prioritize, develop, and implement climate smart infrastructure projects. The workshop, co-hosted by the Budget Office and the Federal Ministry of Environment, brings together key actors across government, development finance institutions, and the private sector to reflect on what is required to successfully implement Nigeria's national determined contribution post-COP26. This constitutes a vital step towards recognizing and implementing the policy imperatives, tools, processes, and practices critical in positioning eligible projects for the $100 billion in annual climate finance proposed by the G20 for eligible projects. Today, we will hear directly from a number of government and private sector financiers who were part of the discussion at COP26 in Glasgow as we set out to achieve the following objectives over the next 2 days. First is to acquaint the ministries, departments, and agencies with Nigeria's updated national determined contribution, which set out the key priority actions to keep global temperature rises below 1.5 degrees centigrade. Use relevant case studies of successful interventions to introduce and explain the concept of climate finance. Help MDAs understand the evaluation criteria that infrastructure finance providers use in assessing potential projects for finance. Provide DFIs and other financial institutions with a platform to connect and establish relationships with the MDAs with existing low carbon climate resilient infrastructure projects proposals at various stages of development. Help address the knowledge gap that will support the transition towards the development and delivery of low carbon climate resilient infrastructure by linking this to the achievements set out in the NDCs. And finally, reinforce the MDAs with international standards of project preparation acceptable by infrastructure finance providers and private sector developers. Finally, I want to close as I started with a warm welcome to those joining us online, those who will end up watching this session on our website and social media platforms, as well as teams across the MDAs, Federal Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning, Federal Ministry of Environment, and key infrastructure MDAs who are here in the room, and those that will eventually review this. Thank you so much for paying attention to my speech. I wish you a fruitful deliberation. Thank you.
Thank you for that short overview, Prof. The MD of the UKNIAF program, Professor Chidi Onya. So I know he's conscious of people not clapping for him, so please can we just give him another round of applause too? Right. Thank you so much, Prof. So we're just going to go straight into the next item on the agenda, which is the panel section. I'm aware that the representative of the Honorable Minister of State, Ministry of Environment, is on her way and should be here shortly to join the panel session. So I'm going to invite the facilitator. So I'm going to invite the facilitator of the first panel session and the moderator and the panelists to please come up and take a seat as I invite you all one by one. So The first panelist on our first panel session for today is the Director General of the Budget Office, Dr. Ben Kabwezi. Please welcome the DG. I am going to invite Gail Waranda, the head of the Economic Growth Team, FCDO. And I am going to invite Dr. Eugene Itua from Natural Eco Capital. And I'm going to invite Bola Mark George, who is going to be the moderator of the first panel session. He is the Climate Finance Advisor for the NDC Partnership.
Good morning, everyone. Protocols being observed. I think the idea of this panel is to sort of set the tone of the workshop and to just sort of have us think through, talk through, and understand where we're going. It's really to sort of set the tone in terms of it's really to set the tone in terms of what we expect and what the country is really looking at in terms of something's feeding back in terms of the panel. So the way I would like to do is for us to just sort of talk about the transition, the climate finance requirements, and from that point of view, the representative from the director from the climate change. I just trying to make sure she's here. She's not here yet, but let me kick this off with that. Nigeria has revised the NDCs. The NDCs were revised and submitted to the UNCCC, and we revised and we had for the NDCs alone 177 billion was the requirement, right? Investment and financial flows that were estimated was in excess of $515 billion to 2030. So how do we get there? That's the question, right? So Director General, budget. How do we get there? That's the question. So you do the budget, you know how much we earn. How are we going to get to this 500 million that we need all over? Sir, is there a mic? We have the mic. Thank you.
One answer to your question is, I don't know. If I knew how we'll get part of the the objective of this work basically sensitize participants to the options that exist. At the end of the day, the budget was actually not, we take a lead role in determining what the gaps, the financing gaps are. But in terms of actually then, reaching out and tapping financing, sources. So we don't take the lead. So what we're trying to do here is play a coordinating role, bring the agencies together, make sure people Professor was speaking, he talked about, during this session, people are going basically intimated with the criteria, that financiers, take into account in evaluating, a project. It's important that the project NDAs who presented in this respect. With multi and the debt management office that plays a leading role in determining debt management strategy, and ultimately deciding what financing options are best for the country, as they have objectives in terms of structure about financing, in terms of the cost thereof. So that's basically what I'm hoping that people will leave here aware that there are options. You don't just simply have to queue up at the treasury over the shortages that you have other and collaboratively we can tap into these economy. Thank you.
Thank you, David. So the message I take away from that is we must collaborate, and there are options: public-private partnerships, debt markets with the government. Yeah. Okay. So, FCBN. The UK is COP president. The idea of Glasgow was we were going to get to 100 billion. We haven't. We're, I think, at 93 right now, or something like that. But that's not, we need more. So what happens? What do we bring? What can you say? Nigeria 177, we didn't get to the 100 that was promised for everybody. We're not like, but this is what it is.
Okay, so I don't numbers, because I think if you've got big targets to achieve and big numbers, it can all seem a little bit daunting, and your question is, where do you start? And everybody here needs to know what they're going to do in their lives, etc. So what's clear is that Nigeria itself can get more money, and that there is money. So whether it's 97 billion or 100 billion doesn't really matter. There's money there, and we need to focus on getting that. And I think the really important thing to do is start learning through this workshop about the different types of money and how you get it. So first of all, I would distinguish between public finance and private finance. It's a distinction we make on the development side. So public finance comes from your budget, it comes from your green bonds, it comes from borrowing, but it comes from your own revenues, and it also comes from, to some degree, from the multilateral development bank money, and sometimes from donors who give you grant money. And then there's private finance. Sterling Bank, venture capital investors, some of the companies you're going to hear about today, like Harrop, etc. And they each have different criteria. So I think the first thing is never finance something with public money if you can get the private sector to do it. So we need to go through our projects and see which ones could be banked by the private sector, and then think about how we make them into bankable areas. And then There are some things, however, which have to be public financed because they don't necessarily give you a return. And to be adaptation. And by adaptation, we mean things that help us cope with the consequences of climate change, like flooding. So flood defences, channels, that kind of thing, they're very difficult for the private sector to finance because they don't have a revenue stream. And I think the key thing is to prioritise for Nigeria to have a really clear list of what its priority public sector projects are, and then to start developing private sector projects and work out which of those private sector projects need bits of subsidy, which of them can stand on their own, and to get that priority list, and that needs to map against the NDC. But probably we also need to start with thinking, does everybody know what's in the NDC? Yeah, that's my thoughts, and back to you.
Thank you. So you're picking up on the Director General's point of collaboration, the need to be distinct in terms of public financing and what it can do and its limitations, and also the limitations that private also have. Because I hear, in terms of adaptation, what can we do? How does that work? Very interesting. So we really need to start thinking again the options of blended finance, using the different mechanisms and having the understanding. Okay, you talked about adaptation, and Dr. Ito as the natural capital. That's his thing. So, Doc, you were a cop. Do you want to share a little of what you see we need to be doing and how we have this blend, this relationship between public and private in terms of financing?
Public finance, private sector just have to come into this class. And still, when I talked about the money is there, the progress ahead. In other words, it seems to be to how to prepare this project pipelines and make them. For the private sector to be able to develop this project pipelines, that could be fun. The private sector needs to be reached. Public sector needs to reach out to the private sector to emphasize that look, we just want to do this journey. It's a project we're working on now. You talked about flood risk. The project has to do with flood risk, adaptation, radio resilience. And the act to develop a model support. And what is the you provide X value of solution, dollar of solution of flood damage, potential flood damage. Is it that you are going to avoid in terms of loss, in terms of damage, and in terms of all that is associated with it that you can consider a loss? In other words, all that we're developing is supported by African American man. It's a neighbor, it's included in the loss. And again, from emphasis, the idea is to bring down is based on the other. It is to say, okay, fine. If UK money, for instance, is giving an X value naira or dollar. So in other words, once you come up with that model, funders will be comfortable. Outcome. And already put it that way. With some money for giving to me. Yes, you want to do your love. You know where you're going. But in reality, sometimes it will be different from the outside. In other words, such a model will support in this. So first and foremost, private sector needs to be reached. Private sector needs their capacity to be built so that they will be in position to be able to develop this project pipelines. And of course, like the model I just talked about, we need more of such that can create comfort for the potential. Time and over, the bankers or the financiers will tell you, oh, project into the deals, whatever that one means. Okay.
Thank you, Doc. Okay. So, project pipeline, bankable project pipeline. The climate finance database is designed to do that, using a tool that is in your office today, sir, Director. That's the decision support tool. So can I just ask in 1 minute, 2 minutes, how you see the climate finance database and the DSD and the whole process working from the public to the multilateral internationals and then private? How do you see this collaboration that you talked about? How do you see it from your own perspective? Because you talked about being the warehouse and driving. Meaning the economy.
That's basically getting that database pipeline of bankable climate is currently a work in progress. Okay. That's what I mean by that's part of it. First is a much better awareness. It's actually something beyond awareness, but maybe more like knowledge. People need to have knowledge about what the options are, what's available, what's feasible. And then also, oftentimes, in my experience, one of the reasons why it seems like public sector, project sponsors are not very warm to some of these options. It's often the time that it takes. Political actors, political leaders are on a clock. It's a 4-year, term of office. It's a hurry to get things done. People are not, piece of cake to ever. I've been involved in a few in my own career. Take time, and sometimes political leaders. So, as we explore these options, I think there has to keep at the back of our minds, how can we actually, some kind of, there's a minimum, due diligence, a minimum processes that must be followed. But is it possible to, routinize what needs? Can we adopt a system approach to this, so that things, somewhat. On our part of what we need to is begin to do things like, project tagging. So when you pick up the budget, without it's by just looking at it and what projects they're doing rather than trying to figure it out by yourself. And again, just thinking the different parties together in this.
Thank you. You've actually described in the process that is envisioned for the climate finance database, and the word you said, tagging, that you can easily see, that is really the objective of the database, from the MDAs all the way through to creating that pipeline that anybody can immediately see. So thank you very much. We can't do this alone. We have our partners. FCDO has been very helpful thus far, but we need to do a lot more. So the commitment to doing this, to achieving this. Gail, can you speak to that? Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. So this isn't just an FCDO thing, as I mentioned earlier. This is very much something across all the development partners. We're all committed to greening, to implementing the NDCs. So on the FCDO side, we have the UK NIAF programme with this project, which is working specifically with the Budget Office. What we also have is the NDC partnership, which funds you, and the Climate Finance Accelerator, the idea of which is to private sector to match it up with the project. The piece that we need to sort out, which we're working on now, which is we also need to states and with the agencies, but particularly the states, to make sure that they have the skills and the capacity to develop and scope out projects in the first place, to feed them through to the budget so that they come to the budget in a good shape. And then we are also supporting through Financial Sector Deepening Africa so that's both public sector green bonds, but also capital markets more broadly. There's a lot more we can do than just green bonds. We're working with the banks as well, and the CBN on what we're calling sustainable lending principles, which will make sure that the banks themselves can start lending, for example, for energy efficiency or for solar home systems, etc. And that needs often a blended finance solution. For them, it can seem quite scary to lend into this sector. So they often need partial risk guarantees to de-risk the infra credit, to reduce some of the risks in that area. And we've put money into entities like Mithio, which is a very data-heavy organisation, but also has a fund which can help finance, for example, off-grid energy. And at the same time, we're building the off-grid developers and that sector, so that we've got projects which you talked about earlier, which are already private sector, and FSDA is around floods. So we've got fingers in many pies, as have, to be fair, the other development partners. And the key here is to coordinate to make sure that we're not overlapping, and to make sure we're really harnessing the different strengths of the development partners.
Okay, thank you. I think time is this is about 11:30 now, so that we kind of like get back on track. Thank you very much. My takeaway, and I think what we should all take away really, is that there's a process. The government of Nigeria is very clear in terms of what it needs to do, and the need to work together, government, donors, international community, and the private sector, collaborating, and this is the beginning of the whole thing. The point that the Director General made is very important concerning the time it takes. We don't have time. Climate finance, climate change. So we need to act, and we need to be very proactive. On that note, on behalf of everybody, thank you very much, Director, Gail, Doctor. Thank you very much for participating. Thank you.
Thank you very much, distinguished. Summary of the first panel session. I am taking away 3 key messages from the answers provided by our distinguished panelists. The budget I heard from the DG as the coordinating ministry for the budget. Of course, be looking to the development partners, the international finance institutions, and other partners in providing the support in, first of all, the identification, prioritizing, and preparing projects that could be eligible for green finance. And as the various ministries, departments, and agencies who are here today, the process of actual prioritizing and submission of projects, which is through the budget office, there will be further sessions early next year, which will start to build the capacity in terms of reviewing the nationally determined contributions and using indicators in a decision support tool that will be embedded in the budget office that will help to identify these projects. We are in the course of this workshop going to demo the initial draft of the proposed climate finance database, which was warehouse projects that have been screened properly and identified as good candidates for green financing. We are also going to have the next panel session, which we are going to now ask questions from the international financing institutions and who are present in the room from the private sector to give us their own view on how to access climate finance for mitigation and adaptation. So without further ado, I'll invite Gori, Olushun, or Daniel to come and moderate for the next session.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Can I just welcome you back from the coffee break? I really want to thank you for being prompt. We have a very jam-packed afternoon of panel discussions. A lot of the morning has really just been about setting the foundation for what we're doing. This event is held on the back of COP26. And we really want to start the conversation internally in country about thinking about the implications of implementing the dated nationally determined contributions and also the pronouncements that were made in Glasgow, particularly the race to net zero by 2060, which the DG mentioned. Kick us off this afternoon, where we will be having a presentation from the NDC partnership. And part of that would be to outline the COP process, the Paris Agreement, which really kicked this off, and also the talk about the latest nationally determined contributions. The speaker for that is online, and I hope that our technical people are really geared up. Those remarks will be made by the NDC country facilitator, Mr. Uzi Nshela. If we can ensure, Uzi, if you can turn on your video, it will really, really help us to be able to see you. And if our team could find him online, can you confirm to me that Uzi is on? Oh, John, you're here. Oh, OMG. John, I wasn't trying to swap you out with Uzi, I promise you. Thanks for joining us. John Hermans is a senior policy advisor with the NDC Partnership. He joins us from Washington. John, the floor is yours.
Thank you, moderator. Thank you, moderator. It's a pleasure to be here with you all, and no offense taken in terms of the switch from Huzi to me.
John, hold on 1 second. Our IT guys are trying to fix why we can't hear you. Just bear with us a second. So what's the weather like in DC?
Well, cold. I think we expect our first snow today.
I can see your lips moving, John, but we can't hear you, unfortunately.
I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Can, John. You've got the floor.
Okay, thank you, moderator. And in terms of the weather in DC, I think it's we're moving into winter, so we expect our first snow actually today. Thank you first for organizing this presentation, this workshop. I think it's incredibly important, especially coming out of COP26. For those unfamiliar, the partnership is a global coalition of international institutions, development partners, and countries working together to coordinate support for NDC implementation at the country level, with a primary goal, really, I suppose you could say, of fostering effectiveness and efficiency to accelerate action. So we work directly with the government to mobilize technical and financial resources of our members to respond to country needs, coordinating global and country level programs to fill gaps in support, enable a more strategic and coordinated approach to the NDCs. So in terms of climate finance, I suppose this really means extending the reach of every dollar spent and maximizing the collective impact against the goals that countries set in their NDCs. NDCs today are much more valuable and important, I suppose you could say, than they were 5 years ago in terms of a coordinating or guiding policy document that from which we program development assistance, from which we identify projects and prepare them for bankability and investment. And I think also that we're starting to see the private sector more acutely narrow in on as a direction of where the government's going and where they should start to look to invest their own resources. So with COP26, I think we all acknowledge that not everything was achieved, and I think we collectively would have liked more out of this, but I think there's a lot that was achieved, and really there's what's clear is that there's quite a bit of finance for the NDCs swelling now. The OECD, for instance, estimates that in 2019, nearly 80 billion in climate finance was mobilized. So in terms of the 100 billion Paris Agreement finance goal, perhaps we're getting close. But we can't wait for 100 billion to be mobilized, or for the likes of the Green Climate Fund to dole this out. I think really at this point, we need to be putting things together and forming those agreements and partnerships that start to get money off the table and put it to work. So, but I think what we can use in terms of the 100 billion is leverage. So using that money as the mechanism to lower the floodgates for private capital, to bring in private sector resources for the NDC, looking at trillions, not billions. For finance, certainly this means a lot of the typical points in terms of putting in place the enabling policy framework that gives confidence to investors that risks are known and shared, assembling investment opportunities or the project pipelines of bankable projects that are transparent, detailed, ready for finance, securing co-finance from domestic or multilateral sources, and equipping project proponents or off-takers with the tools capacity, and know-how to move projects along to bankability. I think now really is opportune, given that we're coming out of 2021 and COP26 with many fresh, updated NDCs that are more ambitious, more clear in terms of implementation. And what we've seen from the side of the partnership is that countries have really streamlined into implementation planning. So putting together the action plans or implementation frameworks that reflect these updated NDCs. And majorly, the focus is on this question of project pipelines and bankability, moving from concepts to feasibility to design. And I think this is the same in Nigeria, where we know that there's a lot of money out there. There's a lot of eager and hungry investors. It's just a matter of putting in front of them the right opportunities for investment to start to pull that money together. The partnership was honored to be part of Nigeria's NDC revision process with support through our Climate Action Enhancement Package in coordination with the UNDP Climate Promise, a key member and player of the partnership. Over the course of 2020 and 2021, the extensive coordination between members supporting the revision process was impressive. There were a combined set of over 30 work streams that went into the NDC and formed the information base that enabled Nigeria to sustain its ambition and raise it even higher and submit a more transparent and high quality NDC to the UNFCCC. Now, the partnership is working closely with the Department of Climate Change and the Ministry of Environment to put together the NDC implementation plan, pulling in the priorities from the sectors and ideally the subnational governments and other stakeholders into a singular framework for action, one that serves as a platform for multiple partners to plan and program from. And then with the Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning, the partnership is also supporting an economic advisor through GIZ and a climate finance advisor through the UK, who are greening the COVID-19 recovery process, developing a pipeline of projects for investment, as well building national capacity on green scenario modeling and project preparation. With NIAF, the partnership through the Climate Finance Advisor, as we'll hear more through the rest of this workshop, is supporting the development of the Climate Finance Database, which we would see as really a central repository to consolidate the projects with full information on their status, their contribution to the NDC, their next steps for investment. Finally, with the Central Bank of Nigeria, we're working also with UK and UK PAC to figure out how to operationalize and further strengthen the deployment of the Nigeria Sustainable Banking Principles to other commercial banks and financial institutions. And I think that work is really kicking off now, and we look forward to continuing it and making it a bigger part of the next steps and future for CBN. But these are things that I think are all kind of in process. I think what the underlying support from the partnerships work in Nigeria is also to coordinate with the government and the development partner community to share information, to enable communication, and also to amplify what Nigeria needs for NDC implementation across our membership to mobilize corresponding support. What we've seen is that when Nigeria steps forward with a request through the partnership, our members are very quick to act. They're very eager to fill these gaps in support and make sure Nigeria has what it needs to implement and achieve its NDC. I think the other thing that we're very impressed and appreciate about our work in Nigeria is that there's a clear leadership from the government in terms of presence in coordinating partners, partners are very willing and engaged in a lot of the coordination meetings that we organize. So I think there's a really rich ground here for making sure that implementation is fast and successful. What I think could be some opportunities for next steps would also be to extend some of the coordination support also to the development finance institutions and form, for example, a working group with the DFIs to collaborate and share information and all participate in the same conversation in terms of who's financing what kinds of technical assistance is in place to keep things to keep projects moving towards bankability, and make sure that we're all working from the same work plan, so to speak. I mean, I think with 177 billion as a price tag for the NDC, there's a lot that needs to be done. This also, I think, really needs to be fast. We have to start to see these projects come together for deals to close and for things to start putting shovels in the ground. With an emissions reduction target of 47% by 2030 and zero as of COP26, as announced by President Buhari, by 2060, Nigeria's climate goals are shared goals. So we all have a major stake in making sure that this is achieved. So with that, I think I'll keep my remarks short and preserve more time for working discussion. So thank you, moderator, for this opportunity today. The partnership is committed and ready to support Nigeria today and tomorrow.
Thank you for that round of applause. Can I just ask that we do a little bit better? Yeah, thank you very much. We're very proud of the partnership approach that the donors have around the support for Nigeria's energy transition. And John, really grateful for you taking the time out. You've had to have a very early start to be able to join us. We really appreciate that. We, in a moment, we're going to move into a panel discussion where we're joined by the finance community. John mentioned a great deal of that in his opening keynote. We have with a hybrid panel. So John, if you keep your video on, might be great for you to be part of this as well. We have joining us online, we have Timothy Aful-Kumsum. He's a Chief Climate Officer at the African Development Bank. Let's make Tim welcome, and as we do that, Tim, if you could put Timothy, if you could put your video on, we'd be very grateful. In person, we have on our distinguished panel, we have, can I welcome to the podium Ayan Adam. She's the MD CEO of AFC Capital Partners. Thank you for joining us. Also in the room, we have Tarie Badi-Geshin from CEO ARM Harith. Forgive me, Tarie, for not pronouncing your name as well as it could be. Please, can we make Tarie feel welcome, please? we're really very grateful for the engagement that we have had with the finance community. Finance is at the center of this conversation around the energy transition. And it's right, as we begin to think about how we move into implementation, it's right that we also get the perspective from the financing community. So in a moment, what I will do is, because we're represented today on this panel by the African Development Bank, but also the AFC and ARM. I'm going to ask each of the representatives to just introduce themselves, the bank, give us a sense of their reach and their approach. And then we will go into a deeper conversation around how they see the emerging landscape for financing projects. This is a climate finance workshop, but what we have actually witnessed over the last 18 months leading up to COP26 is that the conversation across the financial institutions isn't a case of some doing climate finance, but all considering climate considerations as part of their lending decisions. So without further ado, let's start with the ladies in the room. Ayan, just because you're all the way to the left of me, can we start with you? Can you introduce yourself, introduce AFC Capital Partners, so we get a sense of who you are and what you do?
Very much. Thank you to the organizers for inviting us to this forum. My name is Ayan Adam, and I have spent a huge part of my career in this space. I am currently the CEO of AFC Capital Partners. That is 100% subsidiary of AFC. AFC being a sponsored private public institution, mainly focused on infrastructure. So AFC was founded with a strong capital from the. Since then, it is now Nigeria still holds 40%. Around 55 is large private banks, mostly Nigerians that are today Pan-African. Since then, we have 34 African countries that have joined the membership of AFC. We are focused on what we call infrastructure and industrial development across the continent. So our sectors are power, and we'll talk more about that when we get to that. We look at transport holistically to ecosystem-based financing, from ports, roads, industrial parks, logistics, storage. We also look at natural resources. This is a very important part of the African continent. Our countries are mostly natural resource dependent. In the climate space also, Africa is very rich in carbon sinks, which is our forest. That's a natural resource as well. And then heavy industry and telecom, and to head that. She's an alma mater of the IFC, somebody we're proud of. In addition to that, this year we launched the AFC Capital Partners with the intent to mobilize institutional capital in our balance sheet. We have our first fund, which is targeting between 500 and 750 million. It is the name is Infrastructure Climate Resilient Fund, ICRF. We are targeting adaptation as a core investment thesis, and I can delve into that later. And the initial premise is that Africa is only 4% contributor to the So when we talk about transition, we need to start with different bases. Our CEO just issued a statement to the task force for G7, which we worked very hard to prepare, to realize that different countries require different paths. It's really to deal with the impacts of climate change and how do they affect our infrastructure, how do they affect our ecosystems, and how do they affect daily life of the everyday person. So I'm going to end with that and say thank you.
Thank you, Ayan. And you in your remarks really touched on the key theme of the session, because when we talk about the path to net zero, particularly in COP26, we started hearing strong voices from African leaders, the finance community, about the whole concept of the just energy transition. You started off on that. We'll come back to that, but before we do, Tareem, you want to introduce yourself and ARM Harith.
I'm Tareem Balagesha, and I'm the CEO of ARM Harith Infrastructure Investments Limited. Managing capital from domestic capital, including we were actually one of the first funds to be licensed under the Nigerian Infrastructure Fund Management Rules. Scale infrastructure assets in the power sector. We've also got a very strong track record in toll road. Infrastructure investment. ARM Group, which is one of the largest, if not the largest, non-bank financial institution in Nigeria, and capital of our first fund, Untitled One, and we're moving into the fundraising for our second fund, which is the ARM Cities and Climate Transition Fund, which is the ACT Fund. And the focus of the ACT Fund is around supporting urbanization, peri-urban areas and cities to reduce emissions as they grow, so to build resilience, and then finally support with energy transition, climate transition more broadly. And we see this as a very sort of important aspect of an important opportunity, because we manage private. So for us, bankable projects, incomes and disposable incomes that can back infrastructure is that the between urban development, economic activity, and climate, those projects are actually investments that we can make a case for private capital. Earlier is there's that spectrum, and it's very important that we're looking for projects that support the climate transition, but in our case can actually attract and be pause there because there's a lot more in my time at AFC.
Thank you very much, Tareem. I think in our conversations with ARM Harith, one of the key things that struck to us was the fact that they are a private equity infrastructure fund, a significant amount of experience in Nigeria, and they were very, very open to the pipeline of projects that we are developing. I think I hope our team connected you with Kaduna on the Kaduna Energy project that we are supporting. But interested to hear a little bit more about that as we progress. We also have on the panel from the FSD Africa, Victor Nkiri. Victor Nkiri, if you could put on your camera. But before we go to you, we will go to Dr. Timothy Akul Kumsun, the Chief Climate Officer with the Africa Development Bank. The Africa Development Bank, I'll leave you to introduce the Africa Development Bank. Dr. Aful Kumsu, please introduce yourself and the AFDB's role in Nigeria and in Africa broadly. Please, can you unmute yourself?
Yeah, thank you very much. And it's great meeting again, e-meeting. And I am Timothy Afo-Kumsin, and I coordinate the Green Climate Fund at the African Development Bank. Just want to use the opportunity to say good afternoon to our participants and fellow colleagues, and especially want to say hi to my sister Anya that we haven't met for some time now. And it's a pleasure to be on the same panel to see how we could put our expertise together and our knowledge together to really facilitate what Nigeria is doing. So AFDB, we have been assisting our regional member countries to mobilize financial resources from international financing mechanisms such as the Global Environment Fund, the Climate Investment Fund, and it is also an implementing agency for several climate funds. And we can count about 12 climate funds that are very relevant for NDCs and manages other finance instruments such as the Africa Water Facility, the Clean Dev Africa Special Fund, the Sustainable Fund for Africa. And currently, Canada has also added another fund, the Canada Africa Climate Fund, that Canada gave about 130 million to capitalize that fund. So AFDB is really well positioned to assist our regional member countries to really pursue the targets that they have developed for their NDC. And it will also interest you to know, I think our president at the Senate has made, commitment, and this is public, that AFDB is going to pursue climate finance to 25 billion between 2020 to 2025, which we are almost 3 years to that target. And I will assure you that AFDB is really working to meet that target, because there is a commitment from AFDB to commit, having climate finance constitute 40% of all approved operations. So not just, doing with JEF or SAFE or GCF, but in our own internal operations, climate finance, funding for climate finance constitute at least 40% of approved operations. And so I'm really glad that we've been working with Nigeria on some of these initiatives. We work with AFC. We partner together on the Nigeria Solar IPP, which I think Ian also oversee when she was at the GCF. And we have several pipelines that we are talking about, and I'm very, very glad that we could all discuss and share our ideas. And also thank you for inviting African Development Bank to be part of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Timothy. We really value the partnership that UKNIAB has with the African Development Bank. The African Development Bank is a very strong supporter of projects. On our pipeline, we're currently working with them on special agro-processing zones across the country. We have discussions around BRT projects that we may start. So it's great to have you on the panel because you can actually speak like ARM and AFC on real transactions that you are putting money behind to get delivered in Nigeria. So we've heard from a number of financial institutions. We're going to hear shortly from Victor Nkiri, a senior capital market specialist at the FSD Africa. He's going to take a different tilt and tone to the conversation, but The floor is yours, Victor. Please unmute yourself.
Thank you, Bello. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. All protocols observed. It's great being here. And just to introduce myself, my name is Victor Nkiri, as Bello has said. I work with FSD Africa, which is Financial Sector Deepening Africa, as a capital market specialist, and I sit in the capital markets team. FSD Africa is a development finance agency located in Nairobi, Kenya. And our focus basically is working with the financial markets and, of course, with a high theory of change of reducing poverty using financial markets. And this is because we believe that African markets are capable of sustaining themselves when they become strengthened and become efficient. So as FSD Africa, we are able actually to bring transformation and bring this change in two ways. We have our FSDAI, which is the investment wing, which invests and put in equity and debt into different organizations across the continent. Of course, these are demonstrative investments and which have a lot of additionality. And by additionality, of course, simply mean where some return will be a little bit less because some market players like the fund managers and pension funds might not invest in that. So we bring in that additionality because you have to give some percentage of return for impact purposes. So basically, it's impact money that is attracting impact investing that sits with the FSDI. Then we have our technical assistance program, which again supports different programs and projects across Africa. The technical assistance program is currently running projects in over 30 countries in Africa. And we have diverse programs from capital markets to risk and resilience to digital economy programs that we are running. Under the capital markets team where I sit in, we are currently able to do these transformative changes in certain segments, from regulatory changes, working with regulators, and policy changes with governments to change policy and to improve policy in the capital markets.